Chapter 30 Baby Bell. Ariel. A few weeks had passed since the engagement announcement at court, and Ariel had returned to Dragonstone just in time to celebrate her birthday. 6 and 10, Princess Renée said when Ariel sat down for breakfast. You're a woman grown now, Lady Ariel. Hagrid cleared his voice. Aye, she's growing up so fast. I remember when Ariel was no bigger than a bow truckle. Tiny she was, though she's got another year before being of age back home. That's Britain. This is here. Damon waved away Hagrid's explanation. Aye, you're of age in Westeros. That's all that matters, isn't it? Jace agreed with his granduncle, and Harold could see their point too. At Hogwarts, she'd have been of age at 17 and could have bought beer in a magical store. But if she tried the same in the Muggle world, she'd have to wait until she was 18, or wait until she was 21 if she lived across the pond. So Ariel was coming of age, though it was the Westerosi version instead of the magical one Hagrid put more stock in. With a sweet smile, Rhaena leaned closer to Ariel. Since it's your name day, we'll have your favorite for supper. Ariel was honestly a little flummoxed by the attention. Thank you, I'm looking forward to it. We're making cake! Joffrey announced eagerly, his toothy smile wide while busy using his fork to stir his previously appetizing breakfast into a soupy mess. Though Daemon, his daughters Jace, Lucerys, Joffrey and Visenya had returned to Dragonstone a week ago, Rhaenyra and Laenor had stayed behind because of Emma. The twins were born early, small, and it was winter. They were particularly worried about Emma, who wasn't putting on weight as fast as her brother, and the Maester had judged a day travelling on ship too risky. At least they weren't the only ones stranded for the sake of their children. Lady Johanna had given birth to a boy, Lorien Lannister, and though the Lions had been overlooked in favour of the Baratheons, she'd remained at the Red Keep for the sake of her infant's health. Their situations had caused the two mothers to bond, and now little Lorien shared a crib with Viserys and Emma at night to fight the winter chill under the watchful eye of nursemaids. Though while Princess Rhaenyra was stuck at the capital, Dragonstone was left under the rule of Jace in theory, and Daemon in practice. Don't play with your food, Joffrey, Lucerys said groggedly, stabbing his breakfast and making the cutlery scratch against his plate. Someone had clearly woken up on the wrong side of the bed, or poorly if Jace had been snoring again. I want cake, Joffrey protested, pushing away his plate. No, Luke sighed, taking such a large mouthful of his eggs his cheeks puffed out. Cake! No, Joffrey, it's for later, to celebrate Ariel, Rhaena admonished gently. But though the explanation gave Joffrey pause, Visenya had picked up on the topic too. Cake no, Visenya said, nose crunched up as if smelling something bad. Ariel chuckled bemused. What a peculiar little kid Visenya was. She didn't like cake or sweets. She almost never cried and rarely showed strong emotions, be them positive or negative. For the mere mention of cake was enough to set off Joffrey again, was the perfect opposite of his little sister. I want cake now! On the far end of the table, Aemond scoffed, making Luke shoot him a glare. Though Aemond ate with his family as expected during his visit, he kept to the opposite end of the table to wherever Rhaenyra's sons were seated, and spent the meals in silence. Aemond had arrived the day before last on Vermithor, and was the first to give Ariel a present that morning. A pair of golden earrings shaped like dragon wings set with emeralds. They were more suited for a fine event than daily life, but she'd opted to wear them anyway. Since Westeros didn't work on the same hour system as back home, it was debatable if it was her exact date of birth though. A day here counted closer to 25 hours, not 24. Which they discovered after a few months in Essos, and the clock on Hagrid's wall insisted it was late afternoon when it was clearly still the crack of dawn. This abnormality, added with their confusion over the absurd seasonal behaviors, meant they'd lost track of the exact date they'd arrived. Marking down something so trivial hadn't been anywhere near their top priority back then, and now Ariel didn't know her birthday anymore. She'd calculated a proximity, but then in Westeros no one had celebrated birthdays anyway, but name days. A name day marked the day a person was given their name, which didn't necessarily coincide with the day they were born. Some babies born frail or sickly weren't given names unless they recovered, which could be weeks after birth, and if you didn't recover, were oftentimes buried nameless. After coming to Westeros, Ariel had been made to pick a name day date for herself, which was close-ish to what they'd calculated was her birthday, and called it good enough. In the end, it was yet another thing she'd lost to world jumping. But even marking such a big number as Ariel's coming-of-age name day wasn't enough to get her out of lessons. Though their hours with Septa Mega that morning went a little differently when Princess Rhaenys joined their sewing session, both to assist Bela with their latest project while bringing along a gift for Ariel too. It's possible to use the straps to adjust the fits, though I think it sits well on you as is, Princess Rhaenys said as Ariel tried on the gift from House Velaryon. The presents that year had been astoundingly nice, from an extravagant Semite gown from House Targaryen, to the lush winter coat from House Bar Aemon, to an intricate silvery hairnet from House Celtigar. But maybe she should have expected it. Coming of age was a significant number, be it 16 in Westeros, 17 in the Wizarding World, or 18 amongst Muggles. Ariel had known she was getting something form-fitting from the Velaryons, because Rhaenys had gotten her measurements months ago. But instead of another pretty attire to add to her gradually expanding wardrobe, Ariel had been blown away when Princess Rhaenys had presented a set of armor. A dragon rider's armor. The piece was made from black boiled leather with a scaly surface, reminding her of dragon scales, and came with detachable shoulder pauldrons and elbow counters. She could wear her riding attire underneath and it still fit comfortably. Ariel didn't want to sound conceited, but she looked like a badass. Perhaps a little bit like a Quidditch player too, but mostly a badass. Looking herself over in the mirror, Ariel amused herself imagining a game of Quidditch played on Dragonback, before reluctantly deciding it'd be unfeasible in practice. "'Tis not fair. We're dragon riders too. Why didn't we receive armor for our name day?" Bela whined, reminding Ariel slightly of Christmas with Dudley. Bela wasn't acting anywhere near as bratty, but there was still something in her tone, as if it was self-explanatory that she should be gifted the best, and that there must have been an oversight that she hadn't been. "Lady Ariel is a woman grown, whilst you are still only 10, Rhaenys said. "You will receive one once you've reached full height, dear." So 12 was too young to wear protective gear, but old enough for marriage, Ariel thought. "This is stunning, Princess Rhaenys. I'm honored," Ariel said, knocking her fist against the boiled leather over her stomach, testing out how resistant it was. "We'll be hard-pressed to get you out of that," Rhaena joked. "Absolutely," Ariel grinned as she went to sit down next to the twins on the bench. "I'll sleep in it if I can." "Why would you need armor in your private chambers?" Bela teased. "Is there a dragon trying to climb into your bed of late you need to fend off, Ariel?" "Bela!" Rhaena and Septa Mega exclaimed, and Ariel was left blustering. When did Bela start to... "Where have you heard such rumors?" the Septa added. "Nowhere," Bela laughed. "I was merely jesting, Septa Mega." When Princess Rhaenys didn't discipline her granddaughter, Septa Mega let the matter be too. Bela leaned across her twin so only Rhaena and Ariel heard her whisper. "Though it wouldn't be impossible, you're being courted by a dragon, right? One who flew to Dragonstone from the capital for her name day." "Precisely, it's romantic," Rhaena rebutted, pushing her sister until she sat properly again. "Stop insinuating nonsense and focus on your needlework. We have loads left on your wedding gown. You better help, Bela. It's your wedding." With a roll of her eyes, Bela reached for her embroidery hoop while Ariel picked up her own work, her cheeks flushed pink by the teasing. They'd been distracted by Ariel's gifts, but this was still technically a needlepoint session. Their only project of late was Bela's wedding gown, and they had a looming deadline to mind. Back in England, few brides would think to make their own dress, but here it was the norm, especially amongst nobles. They wanted to look their best for their wedding, and wouldn't leave such a task to just anyone, even when they could afford to. Here in Westeros, the best at making clothes wasn't someone in a store or some cloth merchant selling fabric. No, 99% of the time the best at making clothes were the nobles themselves, as they were the ones who received education in the practice. There was a reason Septa Mega spent so many hours nagging about sewing and needlework. It wasn't for shits and giggles, for most sewing was used as much as Ariel had been cooking back in the Dursleys. For those who didn't have magic to aid them, being good at sewing meant they could wear nice things, and wearing nice things gave status at court. Just like how big fashion labels had affected trends back home. The difference was that individuals handmade their own clothes instead. Westerosi nobles were those who set trends because they were the ones with the ability to make the most impressive gowns. They had the gold for expensive fabrics, rare threads and smooth gems. But even more importantly, time to both learn and make something nice out of the precious materials. Nobles had the leisure time for such craft which small folk simply didn't have. For others, those hours nobles spent practicing making luxurious attires were instead used to cook, laundry, work, care for children, livestock or whatever else needed to be done. So Bela was making her own wedding gown alongside Rhaena, Rhaenys, Septimega and Hariel. Not because it was convenient or because she enjoyed sewing, but because it would give the best result. Bela's wedding would not be a small affair and the gown needed to be finished to perfection. Since there won't be a wedding, at least our efforts won't be wasted, Rhaena said while painstakingly working on a stretching dragon wing motif making up the back of Bela's wedding dress. I've heard some gowns are torn and ruined during weddings. Ariel shuddered, reminded of one of the weddings she'd attended at Claw Isle a couple of years ago. Many mistakes were made that day. Still a novice in common tongue, Ariel hadn't known the wedding prayer the guests were supposed to bless upon the couple. She'd congratulated the wrong bride on her wedding and then sneezed in the middle of a speech, though the true mistake had been sitting down next to Maria. She was the cousin of the groom, around Ariel's age, New Valyrian, and at the end of the feast dragged Ariel along with a bunch of other women to escort the groom, whatever that meant. Ariel found out. That's an exaggerated rumor. Princess Rhaenys rebuffed without glancing up from her intricate work of fastening a line of fine shell pearls along the collar of Bela's wedding gown. Quite a challenging task while minding the intricate cut hems and lace. There's occasional accidents, but most gowns only suffer a tuck here and there. Nothing that can be mended. That was true. From what Ariel had witnessed, the wedding attires were effectively stripped of the couple and left intact on the floor except for some wrinkling. It was how the bride and groom were borderline molested that had been traumatizing. Even after the newlyweds were in the bed, the guests remained outside of the door hollering encouragements until long after they were done. Ariel doubted having the bride's uncle yelling, "Is it in yet? If it is, can you tell?" While the rest of the men roared with laughter had helped things along in there. That was never happening at her wedding. As the thought passed her mind, Ariel had a brief, confused moment. Since her crush on Sir Carl ended brutally a few years back, Ariel hadn't pictured anyone specific as the groom in her "when I get married" scenarios. Now though, there was a confusing blend of dark hair to silver-haired, grey to purple eyes. Aemond was becoming a confusing part of her life lately. Before recently, Ariel hadn't seen Aemond that way. He could be stuck up in the way most nobles were, had a short fuse and took offense too easily. But the moment he was on Dragonback, or around magic, he became free and bold. He was a friend, which meant Ariel had always liked him, but not like him. In truth, Ariel had always considered him a kid. Aemond was Helena's little brother, Vermifor's little pet. Then, in the span of a few days, Aemond went from a friend to an insufferable asshole to an ally to a date? It was hard to keep up because of late things felt like they were changing on a weekly basis. Ariel could hardly believe the staggering amount of crap that occurred in such a short amount of time. What was supposed to have been a simple day excursion to Harrenhal had ended in a trip to the north, a succession drama, Hagrid on trial for dragon stealing, Ariel's first kiss, followed by several heartbreaks for half of her friends. Had she known the chaotic domino effect that flight would set off, Ariel would have stayed indoors that day. "What if I flower?" Bela asked quietly. "Will there be a wedding then?" "Aye," Seta said, smiling kindly. "Why can't it wait?" Ariel asked, looking up from her stitches just as she pierced the needles through the fabric and catching her finger. Annoyed, she quickly removed her hand before she bled on her flame embroidery, and rubbed her finger into her bloody handkerchief until it passed. "It's winter. Wouldn't a spring wedding be more festive?" "It would be, but the king wants his son wed before the year's end," said Princess Rhaenys. Aegon might be old enough. Barely. But even if she flowers tomorrow, Bella is far too young. Ariel's frank words were left hanging uncomfortably in the air between the ladies in the solar, until Renée sighed. Bella is not too young to fulfill her duties to her house, as is the responsibility of all ladies to uphold their alliance agreements. Ariel wrinkled her nose because that alliance agreement wouldn't be considered properly secure before there was a child involved, and she didn't mean Bella. When I was 2 and 10, Hagrid turned down the Prince of Pentos on my behalf. Ariel spoke carefully, trying to sound matter-of-factly instead of accusing. Prince Reggio was older than my father, but also because no 2 and 10-year-old is ready for marriage and motherhood. Bella will not be a mother at 2 and 10, Princess Renée said assuredly. So she'll wait a couple of years. It's not much of an improvement to be a mother at 4 and 10. Ariel was trying to stay cool, but just thinking of this was making her temper rise. It was one thing if they just didn't know, but they did. They bloody hell agreed, but they let it happen regardless. Ariel, Septimega pronounced her name like a warning, falling back on the tone she used whenever Ariel got too foreign in her inquiries. It's a woman's honor and duty to give her husband heirs. Then why do you keep sabotaging them for doing their duty? Ariel challenged. You can call my foreign customs queer, but know that those queer cousins of mine made it so the first time either I or Hagrid experienced someone suffer a childbed death was Lady Lena. Excuse me? Renée exclaimed. The mention of their dead mother made Rhaena stop working, while Bella's lips pinched. Childbed wasn't as dangerous back home. Because of your magic? Bella guessed. Magic had nothing to do with it. It was for several reasons, but one of them was upholding the age restrictions on marriage. Though it didn't used to be that way. It used to be like here, a mere guideline. But in the end they acknowledged and enforced what goes ignored here. The Maesters are perfectly aware. You know it too. Everyone knows that the likelihood of girls dying in childbed is higher the younger they are. We do not ignore the Maester's wisdom, but there's more to consider than mere numbers, Lady Ariel. All births are a risk to the mother and child no matter their age. Being too old can be just as dangerous. Septimega said slowly, as if she was speaking to a particularly stupid child. Ariel hated when she did that, because the woman knew she wasn't an idiot. If the Maester deems a maiden ready for motherhood, who are you to question it? Have you been taught by the Citadel? No, you certainly have not. These are evaluations left to the wisdom of learned men. No girl of 4 and 10 is any more ready to be a mother than a boy of 4 and 10 is ready to set off for war, Ariel argued. Sure, a boy may march off to war regardless, a girl may be made to marry, and they may have an easy fight on their respective battlefields if fortune favors them. But the likelihood of deaths are so much higher than any sensible person would avoid at all cost. Only the desperate make green boys fight in battle instead of grown men, not without expecting it to end in anything but loss. So how come you keep doing it with your sisters and daughters? Being older doesn't guarantee a safe delivery, Rhaena said quietly. Our mother and our brother wouldn't have died. That's not what I'm getting at, Rhaena. A seasoned knight can be felt in battle too, the same as a bloodied mother. It's about how child brides are no more effective at giving birth than child soldiers are at battle. A maiden flowered is no longer a child. It's the way a woman's body lets the world know they're ready, Renée said meaningfully. Just as no boy whose voice is broken is a child either. If you truly believe that, then why do you celebrate coming of age? Jace's voice is breaking these days. Does that make him a man grown at 2 and 10? Ready for war and battle? For the responsibilities of his inheritance? Ariel argued. From the day the age restriction laws were enforced, the rates of childbirth deaths dropped significantly. They kept improving the laws and living conditions of the small folk until it reached the point that when I grew up, I did not know of a single woman who died in childbed. Not one. Not in my home, not in my district, in my town. I don't claim they didn't happen. They did. But it was so rare I had only heard of it in stories. I never knew how dangerous it was before I came here and saw with my own 2 eyes how horribly it could go. That's... You were quite young when you left your homeland, so how can you be sure? The Septa said, exasperated. And what does it matter? You live here now. I was 1 and 10 when I left home, the same age as Queen Emma was when she married King Viserys. And even if I was young, what about Hagrid? He's the one who taught me most of this, and it fits with what I remember too, which is precisely why I'm letting you know, as gently as I can, that regarding this, your ways are inferior to what I came from, and that there is a solution. Excuse me, Bella said stiffly, putting down her needlework on the table. My hands feel like pins and needles. May I be excused for the session, grandmother? Rhaenys had barely agreed to it before she was out the door. Let us rather focus on the gown instead of matters that can be changed, hard though such truths are to accept, Rhaenys suggested, holding herself calm but firm. Regardless of your opinions and advice, this marriage will take place at the behest of His Grace, because that is the order of things. If you wish to help Bella, your priority shouldn't be to scare my granddaughter needlessly. It should be to prepare Bella for any challenges she may face in her marriage. Ariel stared hard at Rhaenys, green meeting lilac. That's what I'm trying to do, princess. The Septa kept her for another hour before Ariel was allowed to leave, and once free she set off searching after Bella, but found Aemond in the chamber of the painted table before her wayward friend. Flipping a knife absently, Aemond stood studying the grand map of Westeros with the Kingsguard, Sir Stefan. He heard her coming down the stairs and looked up from the carved stone table. Aemond's knife stopped twirling and his head cocked slightly to the side. Where are you heading? He wondered, a smirk tugging up the corners of his lips. To war? The Triarchy of Fortunate I am not, Ariel boasted, brushing imaginary dust off her dragon armor, and Sir Stefan guffawed. Don't know that I'm of age. She pursed her lips thoughtfully as she took the last couple of steps in one jump. Don't even make jests of such. You started it. Ariel rolled her eyes, sliding up next to him by the table. Sir Stefan looked between them with a knowing smile, and decided to feign interest in the view from the slanted windows to give them privacy, going so far as to start humming a tune. Ariel still wasn't used to that. She had accepted Aemond's courtship mostly out of convenience, and though things were complicated she didn't regret it, especially not after Bella and Aegon were offered up for marriage without a say. How could she blame Aemond for trying to avoid that? She tried the same, and their courtship gave both time and a convenient excuse, even if it wasn't all pros with no cons. She'd compared it to dating, but it was undoubtedly more formal, since courtships were expected to be a precursor to marriage. It was practiced more often after a betrothal than before, though there were examples of people who'd courted without ending up married. Sometimes the courtship lasted the span of a single walk around a park, before one or both decided it wouldn't work. Sometimes it could be a week, maybe a month, though it was rarely longer than that. Ariel and Aemond had courted for weeks, and by now people were behaving as if they were practically betrothed. That didn't mean it was set in stone though. She didn't have to look further than Bella for an example of how quickly things could turn on a dime. What Bella and Jace had been doing for years could be called courting too. Come to nothing but an awkward situation. I'm looking for Bella. Have you seen her? Ariel asked. She went with Jace and Luke. Aemond pointed his knife like it was a wand towards the side entrance across the hall. They left that way. Leaving Sir Stefan humming a sea chantry in the echoing chamber of the painted table, Aemond decided to come along. You make a striking figure in that. Who gifted you such fine dragon armor? Aemond said. You look like a proper Valyrian dragon rider now. Thank you. It was a gift from House Velaryon. Ariel grinned. I didn't expect you to linger. I thought you planned to use the daylight to fly home, or is Vermithor still coiled with Silverwing? He is. It started snowing as well, and it decided to remain another night. Because of the sea, fumes and wind, snow rarely lingered too long on Dragonstone. but of late there still remained a thin cold layer of white powder across the volcanic island. And it was her birthday, which felt off because Ariel was born in July. It should be the height of summer, not a windy winter day. How are you faring with Jace and Luke? The three of you don't always get along. No, but I see no option but to try considering Helena's. Eamon cut himself off and changed his answer midway through. They're the same as usual, but being here for your name day was worth suffering their company. Eamon tried to make light of it, even when they both knew he'd never be here if it wasn't for her. Ariel could call her courtship with Eamon a convenient excuse all she wanted, but it didn't make her blind. Eamon had a crush on her. The attention, the flattery, the visits, the gifts. He was giving this courtship his best shot, and faced with his genuine efforts to please her, Ariel had no idea how to back out without hurting him. But did she even want to back out? Was it Eamon she'd worried about dating or his surname? Was it Cregan she'd liked? Or the convenient excuse to get away from the uncomfortable politics? It had stung to be rejected by Cregan, but she'd accepted his betrothal well enough. Up until Eamon got involved at least. Eamon turned the rejection from a wistful disappointment into a bitter reality, and so furious she turned around and kissed Cregan. Yet when Eamon wasn't being a jealous prat or a stuck-up prince, he could be quite fun. She hadn't forgotten his negative traits, but Harry wouldn't dismiss his better sides either. Eamon was witty, sarcastic and adventurous, especially when away from courtly politics. He could go about it the wrong way, but he tried to look out for her, even when that led to her hating him a little. He cared, and was a strange mix of painfully law-abiding and a reckless hothead, and somehow that's what she both liked and disliked most about him. As dutiful as his mother until he abruptly threw all caution into Vermifor's dragonfire and charged ahead. His reserved exterior made it easier to overlook he was younger, though a year and a half was hardly anything. Beyond his gangly stage of teenagehood, anyone could tell he was growing handsome. The age gap seemed more significant when they were younger, though even when he was simply Helena's little brother in her head, Eamon remained one of the older kids compared to the twins, Jace and Luke, who were still children. Eamon was growing up and Ariel had noticed. It was quite flattering too. The attention, and to be wanted. When push came to shove, there were far worse people to spend her days with than a friend. Again, she needed to look no further than Bela. They tried a couple chambers Bela or the boys were likely to seek out, but came up short until they came across Jace alone jogging down the winding staircase from the stone drum tower. "You're looking for Bela? She's up there," Jace said quickly, and rushed off. Ariel wasn't even given the chance to ask why he was in such a hurry before he disappeared out of sight. The stone drum tower got its name because of the booming and rumbling sounds heard during storms. But even during a brisk breeze, as the snowy weather that day was enough to make the tower noisy. It's why when they heard two people arguing down the hall, Ariel couldn't tell what was said over the groaning. Next to her, Eamon's steps became softer, barely making a sound as he threaded carefully until they reached the last corner. She heard them clearly then. That was Bela alright, but why was she arguing with Lucerys of all people? Over the noise of the drum tower and their arguments, they hadn't heard them approach either. "Your mother isn't here," Bela taunted. "Then I'll tell grandmother," Luke threatened. "Do it then," Bela dared him. "Maybe I will." "Ha!" Bela laughed as if she didn't believe him. "Better I tell her so she can straighten you out. I felt sorry for you before. I thought it was unfair when you were passed over, but it seems Jace was safe to disgrace. Rather Helena than an unfaithful whore." The sharp sound of a slap rang out, followed by quick footsteps as Bela stormed away. The echoing steps grew closer and next Bela turned the corner and only barely stopped before colliding. Except for Bela's gasp of surprise, no one said a word for several seconds. For a lot was communicated through Eamon's ram-straight posture, the way Ariel nervously bit her lip and Bela's tense shoulders. Without a word, Bela pushed past him and marched down the hallway. Eamon stared hard after her as she disappeared, a storm brewing in his chest, while Ariel glanced around the corner, but Luke had left too. He must have gone in the opposite direction, towards Sir Leonor's empty apartments. You heard Luke's words, did you not? Aemond fumed, kicking the floor with his foot. I did. Nothing good will come out of the betrothal. Harriel wanted to ask which betrothal he meant, Bela's or Jace's, but maybe it didn't matter. Aemond didn't start accusing her aloud. She could tell he was trying to keep it down with the grace of someone holding down vomit, but the angry spark in his eyes was telling. How can you blame me? She said, frustrated. I'm sorry I have a different opinion to you, but the worst I did was speak it aloud. Is that so unforgivable? It's never stopped you. Aemond burst. If you'd stayed out of matters of state and inheritance, Helena wouldn't be promised to a budding scandal. And had you minded your own business, nothing I said to the king could have changed anything at all, Ariel hissed. Your sister wouldn't be promised to Jace and your brother wouldn't be promised to Bela because your siblings would already be married to each other. Aemond's jaw flexed, his purple eyes flickering sideways before he let a soft chuckle escape, his sound both derisive and amused. That's fine, maybe, but I never intended for this to come of it. Neither did I, Ariel pointed out. Not for Bela and Aegon. I thought your brother was to be betrothed to Lady Cassandra. What of Helena? Have you heard your sister complain, Aemond? Ariel asked, exasperated. Had he perhaps failed to notice Helena was just about the only one who hadn't? Except the king, that was. My sister is far too sweet and courteous to go against our king father. Or maybe she's far too sweet and courteous to go against her stubborn little brother. Aemond was not an easy person to argue with, Ariel knew intimately, and Helena hated confrontations. She disliked it personally as much as when a confrontation was between strangers she didn't know. So why did he believe Helena would muster up the nerve to tell her true opinion to Aemond, when her obstinate brother disagreed so vehemently on the matter? What? Aemond huffed. What does that mean? Don't make an issue where there isn't one. A lot of people have good reasons to be upset, but Helena? She shrugged, leaving it at that. Just as you don't need to make an issue out of what we walked in on there. It's likely nothing. Don't play me for a fool. You know as well as I it wasn't. Aemond drawled scornfully. I'll sort it out with Bela. In the meanwhile, please? Ariel said tiredly, restlessly brushing her hair behind her ear, fingers brushing against the dragonwing earring. Just don't. Exactly what the don't meant was up in the air though. Don't judge Bela. Don't judge Luke. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't tell. Don't make it worse. She hoped he'd interpret the meaning on his own, and since Ariel turned back towards the stairs and headed after Bela. What did you do? Ariel closed the door to the twins' apartment softly, afraid to phrase the question how she suspected it should have been. Who did you do? Because Bela was 12. She hadn't even had her period, and Ariel didn't want to picture her being sexual with anyone. Yet judging by how Lucetta spoke and the way Bela reacted. Bela had slapped Luke, a prince. And though Bela was a Targaryen, she was neither Luke's sister or mother, only a cousin, a lady, and not a princess. There were things even Bela's station didn't grant her, and striking a prince was somewhere at the top of that list. Not that Ariel truly faulted her loss of temper. Luke had called her a whore. Of course Bela was pissed off and snapped. She had a lot of reasons to be angry of late. Yet, Bela was lucky as hell that Luke was the sweetest of Rhaenyra's children. Had the situation been between their siblings, if Rhaena had done that to Jace, the guards would have already locked her in a room to await disciplinary reformations with Septa Mega. What do you mean? Don't play ignorant with me. What on earth occurred to make Luke call you a whore? How dare you question my virtue, Ariel? Bela said sharply, flaring into a defensive attitude. I'm not. I'm asking why Luke was. Why he'd be doing something so cruel. It's not like him. Hale frowned. Is this about Jace? Did he? Nothing happened, Bella insisted, speaking too fast and looking away. Then what was it you did which Luke threatened to tell Princess Renice? It's nothing. Luke is exaggerating. It was just... I had to relieve myself last night, and I took a wrong door in the dark on my way back. Harry blinked. Did you go into Jace's bedchamber? In the middle of the night? Only by accident, and Luke got all uptight about it. He's reacting unfairly. It's not as if he was in his own chambers either. Of course he wasn't. It's winter, Ariel said, exasperated. Did you honestly expect Jace to be alone in there? You share a bed with your sister too. I wasn't expecting anything, Bella lied stubbornly. I took a wrong turn. Do you think me an idiot? After years at Dragonstone, now's when you take a wrong turn. It's bloody obvious and everyone else would see it too. What on earth was the plan here, Bella? Fuck, but Bella was playing with fire. Make something happen with Jace and thereby force your parents to marry you to prevent a scandal? What of Helena? What do I care about Helena? She's your cousin. She's a lackwit. Don't call her that. And Jace would rather wed me. He told me so. Harold's chest contracted with guilt. I'm so sorry about Jace. I am. But what about your family, Bella? What about Jace's future stability of rule? Is that something you care about? It isn't fair. But your actions could easily have harmed them too. And you know that. How do you think the king would have reacted to this? Jace and I love each other, but those grasping Hightowers ruined everything. Father told me his grace used to be in favor of me. And how far do you believe that favor would have stretched if this little plot of yours succeeded? Even if your father had forced Jace to marry you, do you think the king would have blessed the marriage? Why the hell would he keep favoring you for queen? Or for anything? After you disgraced yourself and Jace, while simultaneously shattering the alliances the king's trying to build by slighting both his daughters and son. Have you any idea what sort of disaster that could have turned into? As if Jace doesn't have enough intrigues and plots to contend with as is. Bella's purple eyes stormed with upset, lips trembling. She looked close to tears but refused to cry. Get out. I'm only worried about you, Bella. You saw how Luke reacted. I want to help you. I don't know how, but I don't think this is the way either. More advice, Ariel? You're full of them today, aren't you? Because I know how you feel. You have no idea how I feel. My life is ruined. Ruined? You want to compare ruined lives? With me? You think I don't know how it feels to lose out? For my life to go in a different direction to what I wanted? To be desperate enough to try and fix it? Ariel exclaimed. I lost my country, my parents, my culture, my inheritance, my home, my friends. Trust me, whatever you're feeling, I felt it too. Bella dried her eyes. Can you leave me be? I want to be alone. Fine. I'm sorry. I'll go. Ariel sighed and headed for the door. I hope you'll come down later. If not, I'll save you a piece of cake. The argument with Bella put a damper on the festivities, though Harold's day improved slightly during tea and cake. Everyone showed up for it, even Bella. She'd calmed down and no one except Reyna seemed to have noticed her eyes were a little puffy. Hagrid arrived with a present in his pocket for Harold too. He still insisted Harold wasn't of age yet, looking pointedly at Eamon as he repeated this, but maybe he'd been a little bit affected by the rest anyway, because it was far nicer than the cake and card he usually made for her. Hagrid's gift was wrapped, and that alone earned him quite a few remarks, especially after Ariel explained that in their home country a present wasn't simply presented, but wrapped first to make things more surprising to find what was inside. This practice was deemed a wastefully frivolous use of parchment to the Targaryens in the room. It became one of those moments Ariel felt like the spoiled little princess instead of the royals for taking something like wrapped paper for granted. But in the end Hagrid waved it aside as, "It's magic. just so Harriel could get on with opening her gift, which was a new cloak. I made it myself from the acromentala silk I had from home. It's pretty useful because the silk is light as spider webs, but water and wind resistant. The hooded cloak was 2-layered, with red wool on the inside and acromentala silk stretched across the outside. Compared to the embroidery skills of Westerosi nobles, it was simple and unadorned, but clean cut and well tailored, leaving the rare material to shine on its own. The wool worked as a warm inner layer, while the magical acromentala silk woven like a white shimmering web protected the red fabric underneath. Harriel loved it, and she sent it around to allow the others to feel the soft yet rubbery texture of the acromentala silk. Cake was served, and Hagrid distracted Aemond from glancing speculatively towards Bela about talking of how Thunderstrike and Morning were faring now that they had more space in their enclosure instead. In the meanwhile, Lucerys and Bela pretended nothing had happened, while Rhaena and Rhaenys remained oblivious. Joffrey tried to steal Visenia's cake piece, but was made to share it with his brothers to make it fair. It almost looked like Harriel's name day would end on a good note after all, until Laenor arrived unannounced, stumbling down the stairs. "Father?" Jay said worried. "Did you fly sea smoke here? It's snowing." Laenor was weather-worn, face drawn, sweaty, and as he walked Harriel could tell he was drunk. Rhaenys got out of her seat. "Laenor, what's wrong?" she asked, though something in her tone sounded like she already knew. "Is it the twins? Did something happen to your children?" The room held their breath when Laenor nodded. "Emma, she caught a fever and she couldn't fight it. Yesterday the shivers took her. She died."